Hello! So, first things first, I'm going to have to apologise for the sound of my voice at the moment. I sound quite croaky. I've had a cold for the last few days, so hopefully it won't detract too much from the video. It might make me sound better, who knows. Anyway, we have the Tecnam P2006T in Microsoft Flight Simulator. And as you can see, it's modelled really nicely. We're on the ground at Boonville, by the way, where I've done quite a lot of test flights just recently. So we're going to have a look at the Tecnam and take it for a flight and see how we get on. As you can see, it's a twin. It's kind of unique in that it has Rotax engines, and the modelling of the procedures required to operate those engines is very, very detailed. So if we go and jump inside, you can see the modelling inside is really lovely as well. So most of the switches work, I think, well, all of them work, I think. And the breakers work. And there's a nice tablet over here, and you can see there's some various options inside the tablet. So we're going to go and turn on the ground power unit just for the fun of seeing it happen, so you can hear things coming to life inside the aircraft. If we look outside, you can see we now have the ground power unit plugged in, and if we look down between the seats at the voltmeter, you can see we're between 12 and 14 volts now, which is good. Okay, so you can see as soon as you have the ground power unit plugged in, it takes over, overrides the master power, so you get the primary flight display lights up. We also get a checklist that tucks away down the side of the fascia, which is really nicely done, and it flips over to show the different phases of flight for really nice checklist basically. So let's go and work our way around it quickly. So pre-flight check. Now I've already done part of this to shorten the video up a bit, but what you can do is you can walk around the aircraft by clicking on these various panels on the tablet, and it's actually interactive. So when you click on one of them, you can turn the props, for example. So we're not going to do it today because it's quite time consuming, but to prepare the aircraft for flight you have to spin the proper number of times, and you can hear, after turning it over a few times, oil is pulled from a sump in the bottom of the engine back up into the engine by turning the propeller, and you have to do that to get it to start. So there's quite a prescribed sequence of turning the propellers, then obviously going through the ignition and the fuel pump and the starter and the fuel cut-off valves as well. So there's a very prescribed procedure to get the engines to start, and if you get it wrong, and also playing with the choke as well while you're doing it. So if you get it wrong, obviously you don't get very far very fast. So I've had mixed success with doing it. I've managed to start the aircraft a few times, but for the purposes of today I'm going to show you the simple way. So you can get, although if you get into this aircraft from cold and dark, you may have a lot of these things checked or unchecked, and part of the reason for that is the aircraft remembers everything. So all the state of things around the aircraft are remembered, and that will be reflected both in terms of checks you have done and the positions of switches and everything. So you can see here, look, I probably let the battery down because I left a couple of light switches on, and it has dipped a little bit. But it gives you some idea that you need to be careful about going through your checklists and bringing the aircraft up ready for flight and pulling it back down again. But there are some helpers if you don't want to do it all yourself, to prepare it for parking, prepare it for departure. So I'm going to say prepare for departure. So the aeroplane will automatically be checked and ready to go. Okay. If we have a look around the weights, there's some nice things we can do where we've got obviously pilot and co-pilot here. If we put passengers in, and I think if we look around we should find there's actually somebody there now. Looks scarily like somebody I used to work with, which is quite amusing. We can obviously remove those people. I don't know if we make them lighter if it actually puts a child in instead. Yes, it does. How clever is that? So we'll remove that passenger entirely. So we're just going to put a small amount of fuel in, and again you have to really think about that because it remembered from my last flight how much fuel I had. So we've done the pre-flight checks. There's a map on here as well, not that it's really of much use, it literally is just a map. It doesn't hook up to any kind of GPS other than, you've got the G1000s in here anyway, so you wouldn't be using this. It's just doubling it up. Okay, so we could work our way all the way through this and get everything ready, or we can press Control and E. So for people who don't want to learn or don't have the time maybe to invest in learning it back to front, we can just press Control and E and you'll see switches start flicking all over the place. So you can hear the engines kicking into life behind us. If we go back into options, we can then go and get rid of that ground power unit. So if we go and turn, it's interesting actually, look, it didn't do everything on Control and E. So if we go and have a look outside, it has started both engines, but it hasn't done things like the avionics, it hasn't done the lights. So I'm kind of shortcutting here just to get it ready for what we would normally do on the runway. Obviously we don't then have to deal with the fuel switches or the engines, which is all fine. I'm just going to turn the volume down next to me so it doesn't feed back through the microphone. So we could put this away now basically, because we have done everything required with, you know, a couple of clicks to get the airplane ready for flight. Okay, so as I said, we could have gone through the whole checklist and played the game with trying to get the Rotax engines up and running, but we're not going to. So we come off the parking brake, we put the flaps to take-off position, and we ease the engines forwards. And we find out that the turning circle isn't that great, so we're going to go onto the grass. It won't turn in its own length as smartly as some other aircraft will. Okay, so let's have a look from outside. Taxiing. It's quite a sleek looking aeroplane, isn't it? So we're going to, I'm just looking at the windsock there. We are going to take off on runway 31, or I think we are. Can we see the windsock? Ooh, actually no, the wind's going that way, isn't it? Quite strongly. Okay, so we're going to taxi down, spin round, and take off in the opposite direction. So it's got the standard working title modified G1000 within the cockpit. The autopilot operation is a little bit odd compared to some of the other implementations that you'll see in the simulator. So I've played around with mapping the disengage and the off switch, and they don't seem to behave as you might imagine they should. We'll find that out in flight when we have a play with it. So we'll just taxi down. So you end up turning modes off basically to get the autopilot to disengage. I don't know if it's a bug. I'm really not sure yet. Okay, so we'll just give ourselves some room, knowing that this doesn't turn very well. Okay, so full throttle. And we can see the indicated airspeed climbing, so 60 knots, 70 knots, and it's lifting straight off the runway. So I gave it slightly more flaps than normal there. It is the pitch of the aircraft at rest is influenced enormously by the flap level, or the flap position. So that's one of the first things I noticed about it, is once you remove flaps it is quite nose heavy. So obviously if we have a look from outside, it does have retractable undercarriage, which we're about to lift, so you get to see it happen, see the animation. Really nice. So we've already retracted the flaps. It's quite a fast aeroplane, so you can see even climbing we've gone up through 100 knots. So I'm going to pull the throttles back to about 75%. You notice once we got the secondary screen on, the engine gauges flipped over to become on the second screen, which is quite neat the way that worked. So we've got pitot heat as well, we can go and turn that on. Not that we're going to need it, it's a lovely sunny day. So other than that, everything kind of works as you'd expect it to. I'd forgotten to calibrate the altimeter. It's quite interesting. You end up having to sit down a little bit to see out of the side windows, which is very common with the simulator aircraft. or maybe it's just the height position I have chosen as my default pilot size. I am quite tall, so if we press space we can see over the nose quite well. Like I said though, you end up having to adjust your view down to do like visual approach pattern work, which is a bit of a shame. If you had a Tobii eye tracker or something like that, you can obviously just duck your head. It would make no difference. I may be investing in one soon. Okay, so if we come back to 50% throttle, shall we try a stall out as we're coming downwind? So I'm just lifting the nose, watching the airspeed bleed off. Not going too high. Let's pull it up to 20 degrees. I'm still at 50% throttle. Just want to see what happens when it falls over. So we're getting near to stall. We've got no flaps, remember. So full back stick, and it's not going to stall at 50% throttle. It's just going to lower the nose. Okay, so we'll get some speed back up, so we can actually get the nose up, and then we'll kill the engine. So 20% or 20 degrees or 25 degrees. Engines to idle. And the nose just drops. So it's very, very stable. Should we go for a more severe stall and see what happens? So just get some airspeed back. Pull up to 40 degrees and 50 degrees and pull the engines to idle. Full back stick. We had no stall warning, so there was no klaxon, but it fell in a very straight line. Okay, let's try a turning stall and see what happens. So 50% throttle, pulling it up into the turn. It's not going to drop a wing. It's extremely stable. What about if we throw it from side to side with the rudder? Yeah, you can see it's surviving everything we throw at it, which is remarkable, really. Okay, let's do an approach then, shall we? See how we get on. So the airfield's back over this way. Should we tune in VOR as well, VOR radio, while we're flying along? So CDI is in GPS mode. Let's turn it over to radio mode. It's 11320, I think, for the local VOR here. Or was it 11230? I think it might be 11230. Change that to active. Yeah, it's just lit up, look. So if we were to change the course, which I've forgotten how to do it. There's the heading bug. Course, oh, it's over here. There we go. So if we were to spin this round, for example, and hopefully it would go a bit quicker than that, but it's not going to. So yeah, so radio kit works as you'd imagine it should. So we're a bit high for an approach. So I'm just going to circle and lose some speed. So gear down. Drop the flaps. Obviously will give us some drag. It does appear to be, because it's such a slick aeroplane, it is a job to slow it down. So obviously we could go for full flaps, which will give us a lot more drag, but obviously a lot more lift as well initially. So let's see what happens when we come back towards the runway direction now. That's a bit better. Still high. Let's see if it accelerates. See, it's accelerating downhill. So let's try side slipping it. You can side slip a lot, and that is losing a lot of lift. That's got us into a much better position. Okay. So, holding about 75 knots. Just draining speed off gently as we come in. So the aeroplane is very, very placid, it has to be said. I'm quite stunned actually. So let's flare it out and let it fall onto the runway and see how it falls. Didn't actually hear anything. Now I don't know if that's because there's no sound or because I came in so smoothly, so let's wallop it into the runway to find out. Yeah, there's no real distinct sounds there. So let's raise the gear and the flaps. Let it climb out and gather some speed. Come back off the engine slightly and steep bank turn, back down the valley, and we'll come in and put it on the runway and then have a look at it again. So if we press Alt and down, you can see the airfields zooming past beneath us. Cut the engine already, knowing that this takes a while to slow down. So it accelerates very quickly, it doesn't want to lose speed. There appears to be a small amount of positive thrust from the propeller. So obviously you could play games with the propeller condition. I'm not going to. Okay, so gear back down. Flaps back down. So speed is scrubbing off. Runway. It's more interesting landing this direction of Boonville when the wind is this direction, because you have the hill to contend with. So let's just sit up a little bit so we can see the tree. And we'll settle the aeroplane back down onto the ground and roll in. And we're down. Okay, so I have mixed feelings about this aeroplane. It's almost great, but there's just odd things. Oh, well, someone's had an accident in a parking lot with their Cessna. Now, is that a human player or is that an AI plane that's had a bit of a turn? I think it's an AI plane. So yeah, this Tecnam P2006T is almost great. I think the engine sound internally lets it down a little bit. And it may be that the Rotax engines sound exactly like this. But it goes into your head after a while and it just sounds a bit like a lawnmower. But yeah, there's just odd little things like the lack of a sound when the tyres touch the runway and things like that. Could be better. And the odd thing, although I didn't demonstrate it, the disengage of the autopilot doesn't seem to follow normal behaviour that you might expect. That Cessna's quite funny, isn't it? So we'll just park this up where we started from, put the parking brake on, and we can cut the engines just by turning the ignition off, basically. Fuel pumps were off. We can obviously go and turn the fuel to the off position, and then we can go around the cockpit turning things off. Ooh, yeah, so off, 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 off. This can all go off. I've done that in the wrong order, by the way, but we're not going to worry too much. So yeah, there you go. So it's worth saying, actually, you didn't see the tie downs and stuff. So if we were to go in here, I'll go and put them all in place. So if we load that cold and dark state, that doesn't do it, does it? Ready to start. cold and dark. Let's go for the pre-flight prepare for parking. Will that do it? Yeah, there we go. So it shortcuts it. So around the aircraft, you didn't see this at the start because I shortcutted it, but there's tie downs, there's chocks, and there's pitot covers, and you can actually go around the aircraft. If you do this walk round, they become clickable to remove them. So it becomes part of those checks that you do to go and remove the various things. So it is really involved. It's just a shame that they could have been better. Yeah, maybe they will update it and the sounds will improve slightly, and the weirdness around the autopilot disengage might get fixed. But otherwise, it's really, really good fun. I think it's quite expensive for what it is. I think the price of aircraft has come down with Flight Simulator compared to previous simulators, because people realise obviously they can sell an awful lot more of each aircraft. But I think this is actually quite good value because you get a lot to play with in terms of the systems modelling and the procedures. So it's good fun. And obviously if you like this sort of aeroplane, it's a bit of a no-brainer. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So that was the Tecnam P2006T in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and my voice lasted out. Hurrah! Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, and I'll see you again soon.